The air in the forward operating base's armory was thick with the familiar, almost sacred scents of CLP, gun oil, carbon fouling, and hot steel. It was a symphony of readiness, a place where the tools of war were cared for with a reverence born of necessity. Captain Marcus Thorne, Calcine, Ares, commander of a specialized Marine Corps Special Operations Unit, found a strange comfort in it. He walked through the caged aisles, the ambient noise of his men cleaning their rifles and cataloging ordnance, a familiar backdrop to the quiet tension of their deployment in the jagged, unforgiving mountains of the fictional nation of Viridia. He was looking for his unit's primary sniper, Sedgante Kowalski, to go over some last-minute details for the next patrol. He found the designated sniper's bench, but it wasn't Kowalski who was there. Instead, a lone figure was hunched over the disassembled components of an M40A6, this 10th-issue sniper rifle for the Marine Raiders. The operator's movements were fluid, economical, and possessed a level of focused intensity that made Thorne pause. Every component was laid out on the oil mat in perfect alignment, each pin and spring cleaned and inspected with a surgeon's precision. Expecting to see one of his raiders, he was taken aback when the operator finally looked up, a pair of startlingly clear, gray eyes meeting his. It was a woman. She was lean, with her dark hair pulled back in a tight regulation bun, her face a mask of concentration that was now broken by a flicker of acknowledgement. Her rank insignia identified her as a gunnery sergeant. Thorne prided himself on knowing every operator, support staff, and even the cooks on his fob, was at a complete loss. He had never seen her before. She wasn't just cleaning the weapon. She was communing with it. Her hands moved with an innate familiarity, seating the bolt with a whisper-quiet click that spoke of thousands of repetitions. She checked the trigger group with a touch so delicate it seemed she was reading it with her fingertips. This was not routine maintenance. It was a ritual. Thorne had seen a lot of skilled snipers in his 15 years of service, men who were deadly accurate and professionally diligent. But this was different. He was witnessing a level of intimacy with a weapon system that bordered on artistry. He realized, with a jolt of professional intuition, that he wasn't just looking at a proficient soldier. He was looking at a true master, a specialist of a caliber he had somehow, inexplicably, never encountered. "You're not Kowalski," he stated, the word sounding more like a quiet observation than an accusation. She finished seating the magazine before speaking, her voice calm and even, without a trace of surprise at being addressed by the unit commander. "No, sir, I am not." She didn't offer anything further, her attention already returning to her rifle, her focus absolute. Thorne stood there for a moment longer, a dozen questions bubbling under the surface. Who was she? What was a gunnery sergeant from an unknown unit doing in his armory, handling a precision rifle with more care than a bomb disposal tech handles a live fuse? He knew then that the dynamics of his forward operating base had just changed, and he had no idea why. The next morning, the atmosphere in the briefing tent was thick with stale coffee and palpable tension. A large, high-resolution map of the treacherous Sangan Valley network was projected onto the main screen, red circles marking the locations of recent casualties. Thorne's team, a hardened group of Marine Raiders, sat around the makeshift table, their faces grim. For the past 3 weeks, they had been hunted. An enemy sniper, nicknamed the Ghost of the Ridges by local forces, was systematically picking off patrols with unnerving accuracy from extreme distances. He was a phantom, striking from positions they couldn't identify and ranges they couldn't counter. Morale was fraying. Intel is still coming up short on his nest. Lieutenant Ken Oracle Tanaka, the team's intelligence officer, reported grimly. "We've lost 3 men and 2 Afghan National Army soldiers in the last month. Every time we think we have him localized, he vanishes." The last engagement was from a confirmed 1,600 meters. Our own counter-snipers can't effectively engage at that range, not in this terrain. A heavy silence settled over the room. 1,600 meters was a hell of a shot, requiring immense skill and a deep understanding of ballistics and atmospheric conditions. It was a range that pushed the effective limits of their own equipment and training. Just then, the tent flap opened, and the woman from the armory stepped inside. She moved with a quiet confidence, that drew every eye in the room. She was dressed in a standard combat uniform, but she carried an air of authority that was unmistakable. She handed a file to Thorne and stood at the head of the table. "Captain Thorne," she began, her voice cutting cleanly through the tense air. "My name is Gunnery Sergeant Eva Rostova. I've been temporarily attached to your unit by JSOC directive." Whispers rippled through the room. JSOC Joint Special Operations Command us. The umbrella command for the military's most elite and clandestine units. A direct attachment from them was rare and signaled a situation of extreme importance. Rostova gestured to the map on the screen. "I've reviewed the intelligence reports on the Ghost, his shot placement, his choice of firing positions, and his engagement distances suggest a level of training and equipment that is not indigenous to this region. He's a professional, likely a foreign asset." She paused, letting her words sink in. Then, she delivered the line that changed the entire conversation. "My operational experience includes extreme-range counter-sniper engagements. I am proficient well past 2,500 meters." The room went completely still. 2,500 meters. It was a distance that sounded more like artillery than rifle fire. The skepticism from the seasoned operators was visible. It was a claim that bordered on the impossible under real-world combat conditions. One of the team sergeants shifted in his seat, a cynical smirk playing on his lips. Rostova seemed to anticipate the doubt. She didn't boast or raise her voice. Instead, she calmly pointed to a specific ridge on the topographical map. Based on the ballistic trajectory of his last 3 engagements, factoring in the Coriolis effect at this latitude, and the prevalent wind patterns in this valley, his most likely next firing solution will originate from this sector. She zoomed in on a tiny, almost imperceptible He's using the complex rock formations to mask his thermal signature from our drones and his acoustic signature from our sensors. He feels safe there because he believes he is untouchable. He believes he is outside our reach. Her cooler, scientific analysis, delivered without a hint of arrogance, silenced the skepticism. She wasn't bragging about a capability. She was stating a tactical fact. The entire strategic problem, which had seemed insurmountable moments before, was suddenly The Ghost wasn't a phantom they had to hunt. He was a target, and they now had a weapon capable of reaching him. The presence of this quiet, unknown gunnery sergeant had just redrawn the map of their battlefield. Words in a briefing room were one thing, performance in the field was another. Thorne, a man whose trust was forged in fire and action, needed to see Gunnery Sergeant Rostova operate with his own eyes. The next day, under the guise of a reconnaissance patrol, he accompanied her and a small fire team into the jagged peaks that overlooked the valley where the Ghost had last struck. The ascent was brutal. The air grew thin and sharp, and the terrain was a treacherous mix of loose shale and near-vertical rock faces. Thorne, in peak physical condition, found himself working hard to keep pace. Rostova, however, moved through the landscape with an uncanny efficiency. She didn't just climb, she seemed to flow over the rocks, her steps so light and precise they barely disturbed the loose gravel. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. It was the kind of environmental mastery that couldn't be taught in a training course. It was learned through years, spent living and fighting in the world's most hostile environments. After a grueling 6-hour climb, she finally stopped, choosing a spot that Thorne would have dismissed as utterly inadequate. It was a shallow depression between 3 large, gray boulders, offering no obvious line of sight into the valley below. But as she began to set up, he saw the genius in it. From a standing position, it was an invisible hole, but from the prone position she assumed, a narrow, perfectly concealed channel opened up between the rocks, providing a commanding view of the opposing ridgeline nearly 2 kilometers away. It was a sniper's hide built by nature, invisible to the naked eye and undetectable by thermal imaging. What followed was a masterclass in the science of long-range marksmanship. She didn't just glance at the sky, she studied it. She pulled out a Kestrel weather meter, taking readings on wind speed, direction, air pressure, and humidity. She consulted a ballistic calculator on a ruggedized tablet, her fingers flying across the screen as she input data. She spoke aloud, not to Tournay, but to herself, a quiet litany of calculations. Spin drift, Coriolis, aerodynamic jump, The updraft from the valley floor will add 3/4 more. At this range, it was like watching a physicist solve a complex equation, except the variables were constantly shifting with the mountain winds, and the result was a matter of life and death. She assembled a rifle, a heavily modified M200 intervention, a weapon system known for its extreme range capabilities. Every action was deliberate and precise. As she settled in behind the scope, her entire demeanor changed. Her breathing slowed, her body becoming as still as the rocks around her. For 2 hours, she lay there, utterly motionless, observing the far ridge through her powerful optic. Thorne and his men provided security, their own tension mounting with every passing minute. Then, it happened. A flicker of movement on the distant ridge. Oracle, monitoring on a high-powered spotter scope, confirmed it. "I've got movement. 2 individuals. Looks like they're setting up an observation post." They were the enemy, spotters for the Ghost. Rostova's voice came over the radio, impossibly calm. "I have them. Range, 1,850 meters. Wind is variable, 7 to 10 miles per hour. Full value from my 9 o'clock. There was a long pause, a silence that stretched into an eternity. Thorne watched her, unblinking. He saw her make a final, minute adjustment to her scope, saw her index finger gently curl around the trigger. The report of the rifle was a deafening crack that echoed through the mountains. An instant later, Oracle hissed into his mic, "Target down." Jesus, it's a direct hit. Before the echo of the first shot had fully faded, Rostova was already working the bolt, her movements smooth and practiced. She took another slow, measured breath. "Second target is on the move." Acquiring. The second shot rang out, another pause filled with unbearable suspense. "He is down. Second target is down." Oracle's voice was a mixture of shock and awe. 2 shots, 2 kills, over 1,800 meters. Unbelievable. Rostova said nothing. She simply cycled the bolt, chambered a fresh round, and resumed her silent vigil, her breathing slow and steady, her eyes already scanning for the next threat. She had not just proven her capability. She had demonstrated a level of calm, surgical lethality that Thorne had never before witnessed. It was a cold, calculated, and utterly perfect execution of her craft. Back at the relative safety of the FOB, the events of the day replayed in Thorne's mind. The calm precision, the impossible shots. It was beyond mere skill. It was a mastery that begged the question. Where in the hell did Gunnery Sergeant Eva Rostova come from? Officially, her file was a ghost. It listed her basic service record, jump qualifications, and a string of assignments to nondescript training commands. It was a sterile, deliberately vague document that revealed nothing and concealed everything. Thorne sat down with Lieutenant Tanaka in the dimly lit intelligence tent. "Oracle, I want to know everything about her," Thorne said, his voice low. "I don't care what you have to do. Use your back channels. Call in every favor. I need to know who I have operating with my team." Tanaka, a wizard of the digital and human intelligence networks, nodded grimly. "Already on it, sir. Her official record is a brick wall. It's been scrubbed clean. The digital ghosts always leave a trace." For the next 48 hours, Tanaka worked relentlessly. He reached out to contacts in the intelligence community, traded encrypted messages with old colleagues and other special operations units, and dug into classified mission archives that were technically far above his pay grade. What came back was not a clear picture, but a series of fragmented, whispered legends. He found a heavily redacted after-action report from a firefight in the Korangel Valley in Afghanistan. It mentioned an unidentified asset from a task force who neutralized a DSA heavy machine gun position from a nearly vertical angle at a range classified as extreme. He found another whisper from Mosul, Iraq. During the brutal house-to-house fighting, an ISIS command and control element was eliminated when a single round penetrated a specific window of a fortified building from a distance believed to be over 2 kilometers, a shot that should have been impossible in such a complex urban environment. The asset was only referred to as Valkyrie. The pieces were starting to form a mosaic of a truly legendary operator, a ghost who moved between the most dangerous conflicts in the world, leaving a trail of impossible shots in her wake. The final piece of the puzzle came not from a computer, but from a secure satellite phone call. Thorne had reached out to his mentor, Colonel J.D. Stryker, a grizzled veteran serving at SOCOM headquarters. "Marcus, you need to be careful what you ask for." Stryker's voice crackled over the line. "Some files are buried for a reason." "I need to know, Colonel," Thorne insisted. "She's operating with my men. I need to know what I'm dealing with." There was a long sigh on the other end of the line. "Eva Rostova," Stryker said, his voice dropping. "She's not just a sniper, Marcus. She's a strategic weapon system in human form. For years, she was part of a highly classified program focused on pushing the absolute boundaries of ballistic science and human capability. Most of her work is, and will always be, deniable." Stryker paused, and Thorne could almost hear him debating how much more to reveal. "A few years ago, during a counterterrorism operation in North Africa, she neutralized a Havalia target who was about to trigger a dirty bomb. The intelligence was last minute. The conditions were atrocious: high winds, a sandstorm brewing. She took the shot from a helicopter skid." "What was the range?" Thorne asked it, almost afraid to hear the answer. Stryker's reply was quiet, but it hit with the force of a physical blow. The shot was officially confirmed by multiple assets at 3,480 meters. It's the longest confirmed combat sniper kill in modern military history. It's a record that's not supposed to exist, and a capability that, on paper, is considered impossible under real combat conditions. "You're not dealing with a sniper, Marcus. You're dealing with the woman who holds the ghost record." The intel from Colonel Stryker had barely settled in Thorne's mind when a new, urgent threat materialized. Oracle intercepted a high-priority communication. The enemy, reeling from the loss of the Ghost and his spotters, had escalated. They had brought in their own team of elite snipers, a unit of professional mercenaries known for their work with rogue states. These weren't local insurgents. They were Tier 1 operators, trained and equipped for extreme-range warfare, and their mission was simple: hunt and kill the American sniper who had so thoroughly outclassed their previous asset. The new intelligence included satellite imagery of their equipment. They were fielding advanced, suppressed rifles chambered in 416 Barrett and 375 Chi-Tac, coupled with sophisticated counter-sniper detection systems designed to pinpoint a shooter's location from their muzzle blast and thermal signature. They were professionals, and they were hunting Rostova. Thorne called an immediate strategy session. The mood was somber. They were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. Rostova, however, remained unnervingly calm as she reviewed the data. She analyzed the enemy's equipment specifications, their likely tactics, and the topography of the region. After a long, silent analysis, she looked up at Thorne, her gray eyes clear and resolute. "They're coming for me," she stated simply, without a trace of fear. "Their tactics will be to set up an overwatch position and use their spotters to bait us into a response. They'll use their detection gear to pinpoint my firing position the moment I take a shot. We can't fight them on our terms or on their terms. We have to create a new set of terms." She pointed to a series of distant, almost inaccessible mountain peaks on the map. "The only way to neutralize them is to engage from a position they believe is impossible. We need to push the engagement envelope out to a range where their detection systems are ineffective and their own rifles are at the absolute limit of their ballistic capability." She drew a circle on the map. "We need to operate between 2,800 and 3,500 meters. We have to fight them from a distance. They won't even be looking." It was a staggering proposal. She was talking about ranges that were not just at the razor's edge of human possibility, but far beyond it. It was a realm of marksmanship that was more theoretical physics than practical shooting. "To do that," she continued, "I need some things. The M200 is a capable platform, but I need it modified. I need a custom-built barrel with a faster twist rate to stabilize a heavier IBC projectile at transonic speeds. I also need hand-loaded ammunition, tailored specifically to the atmospheric conditions of that altitude. Each round needs to be a perfect, scientific instrument." It was an audacious request. Asking for custom-milled rifle parts and specialized, handcrafted ammunition in the middle of a remote combat zone was like asking for a 5-star meal to be delivered to the front lines. But Thorne looked at her, at the quiet, unshakable confidence in her eyes. and he remembered the 2 kills at 1,850 meters, and the story of the 3,400-meter ghost record. He was no longer dealing with a soldier. He was entrusting his mission to a force of nature. "You'll get it," Thorne said without hesitation. He spent the next 12 hours on the satellite phone, calling in every marker he had, pushing every button, and leveraging Colonel Stryker's authority to its absolute limit. He moved heaven and earth, and 48 hours later, a C-130 transport plane made a high-risk, low-altitude supply drop. A single, heavily protected crate parachuted into the fob. Inside was a custom-machined rifle barrel and a case of ammunition, each polished brass casing looking more like a piece of jewelry than an instrument of war. Thorne had secured the resources. He had placed his trust and the lives of his men in Rostova's impossible judgment. The day of the mission arrived with an almost supernatural stillness. The turbulent mountain winds, which were a constant, unpredictable force, had died down completely. The air was crystal clear, the humidity was low, and a high-pressure system had settled over the entire region. It was a sniper's window, a rare and perfect convergence of atmospheric conditions that might last for a few hours at most. It was now or never. Rostova was alone. She had insisted on it. A full team would create too much of a signature. She moved into her pre-selected firing position, a natural crevice high on a desolate, windswept peak, hours before dawn. She was a solitary figure in a vast, silent landscape of rock and sky. From her vantage point, she had a clear line of sight to the opposing mountain range, a staggering distance away. In the command post, back at the FOB, Thorne Oracle, and the rest of the team watched a drone feed on the main screen. They could see the area where the enemy snipers were believed to be operating, but they couldn't see the snipers themselves. They were complete ghosts. The only link to their hunter was the sound of her calm, steady breathing over the encrypted radio. "I have them." Her voice finally broke the silence, as steady as a surgeon's hand. 3 targets. They've established a primary hide. Range is 3,250 meters. A wave of disbelief washed over the command post. 3,250 meters. Over 2 miles. At that distance, the bullet would be in the air for nearly 8 seconds. The rotation of the Earth would have a significant effect on its trajectory. A 1-mile-per-hour crosswind could push the bullet off target by more than 10 feet. "First target is static." "Spotter," she reported, her voice a low murmur. "Wind is negligible. I am holding for Coriolis. Firing." The drone feed showed nothing. The silence in the room was absolute. They were all counting in their heads. 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. The seconds ticked by like hours. 6 1,000. Then, a tiny, almost imperceptible puff of dust erupted from a rock formation on the screen. A moment later, Oracle, who was monitoring a highly sensitive acoustic sensor network, slammed his fists on the table. "Confirmed. We registered a supersonic crack, an impact. Target 1 is down." Holy ... double quotes. Before he could finish, Rostova's voice came back, devoid of emotion. "Second target is static. Sniper. Range is 3,280 meters, adjusting for temperature differential. Firing." Again, the agonizing wait, the same surreal countdown. And again, the impossible result. A second puff of dust. A second confirmed impact. 2 shots, 2 kills, at a distance that military textbooks said was impossible. The men in the command post were stunned into silence, witnesses to something that defied all known limitations. But Rostova wasn't finished. "Third target is on the move," she announced, her voice still impossibly calm. "He's running for cover. Target is mobile." Thorne's blood ran cold. Hitting a stationary target at that range was a miracle. Hitting a moving one was an act of God. It required predicting where the target would be 8 seconds in the future and placing a bullet in that exact spot in space and time. "Tracking, leading him by 27 meters, she murmured, a statement of pure, unadulterated ballistic calculation. "Firing." This time, the weight was unbearable. Everyone held their breath. The drone zoomed in, the image pixelated and shaky. They saw the running figure on the screen, and then he simply crumpled, falling in a heap. A third, final puff of dust rose from the ground beside him. Silence. Then, an explosion of triumphant, disbelieving shouts filled the command post. Thorne just sank into his chair, staring at the screen, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. 3 shots. 3 kills. From over 2 miles away, including a moving target. The mission was a success. Their losses were 0. And it was all thanks to the quiet woman alone on a mountain, who had just calmly, and with surgical precision, broken the known barriers of combat marksmanship and redefined what was possible. The debriefing was a surreal affair. The raw data confirmed what they had witnessed in stunned disbelief. Rostova's 3 shots had not only neutralized a high-level threat, but it also shattered every existing record for long-range combat engagements. The official distances were logged: 3,250 meters, 3,280 meters, and the final, impossible shot on the moving target at 3,310 meters. These weren't just numbers. They were declarations that the rules of warfare had been fundamentally rewritten. The most telling evidence came from the intercepted enemy communications. Oracle played the frantic, terrified chatter for the team. The surviving enemy operators were in a state of shock and panic. They weren't reporting sniper fire. They were screaming about airburst artillery or drone strikes from the heavens. They could not comprehend that they had been hit by rifle fire from a distance they considered to be on the other side of the horizon. They couldn't see the muzzle flash. They couldn't hear the sound of the shot until long after the bullet had found its mark. In their minds, they were being hunted by a ghost, an invisible, omniscient force that could strike them down from anywhere. Fear and paranoia had crippled their entire operational network in the region. The strategic impact was immediate and profound. A few days later, a priority directive came down directly from JSOC. Gunnery Sergeant Eva Rostova's temporary attachment was made permanent. She was no longer a visiting asset. She was now officially assigned to Thorne SA Raider Unit. The directive made it clear. Rostova was to be considered a strategic-level asset. Her very presence in a theater of operations was now a form of psychological warfare. She was a weapon that could project force and fear across vast distances, forcing adversaries to reconsider their tactics, their force protection measures, and the very definition of a safe zone. Commanders from other sectors were now requesting Rostova by name, not just for counter-sniper missions, but for high-stakes hostage rescue operations and strategic reconnaissance. Her ability to provide overwatch from impossible distances meant that missions previously deemed to high risk were suddenly viable. She was a key that could unlock tactical problems that had no other solution. Thorne realized that his unit had been given a weapon more powerful than a helicopter gunship or an artillery battery. They had been given a legend, and her reputation was now as formidable as her aim. The quiet woman from the armory had become a strategic shockwave, and her ripples were reshaping the modern battlefield. In the aftermath of the record-breaking mission, the fob was buzzing. The story of the ghosts of 3,400 clicks, as the men had begun to call her, spread like wildfire. Operators from other units would walk by the armory, hoping to catch a glimpse of the legendary sniper. They expected to see a hero basking in the glory of her incredible achievement. But what they saw, what Thorne saw, was something far more profound. Hours after the debrief, Thorne walked back into the armory, the scent of gun oil once again hanging in the air. There, at the same bench where he had first seen her, was Gunnery Sergeant Eva. She was meticulously servicing her rifle. The custom M200 intervention was completely disassembled, every pin, spring, and lever laid out in perfect order on the oil mat. Her movements were the same as they had been that first day. Fluid, focused, and reverent. There was no sign of celebration, no hint of ego. She was simply engaged in her process, her quiet and disciplined routine. Thorne watched her for a long moment, and in that silence, he finally understood. Her true strength, the source of her almost supernatural ability, wasn't in the pull of the trigger. It wasn't in the single, heroic moments of glory that would be whispered about for years to come. Her true power lay here, in this humble, disciplined act of preparation. It lay in the thousands of hours of unseen, unglamorous work. It was in the relentless pursuit of perfection, the consistent mental and physical preparation, and the unwavering professionalism she brought to her craft every single day. The spectacular results in the field were not the performance. They were merely the consequence of this quiet, disciplined mastery. Over the following months, the operational boundaries of Thorne's unit were completely redrawn. Missions that had once been on the edge of impossible became achievable. With Rostova providing overwatch from distances the enemy couldn't even imagine. They could infiltrate deeper, stay longer, and strike with a level of precision and surprise that left their adversaries completely demoralized. She remained the same quiet, disciplined professional Thorne had met in the armory. Her brilliance wasn't loud. It was the quiet, consistent hum of excellence that elevated everyone and everything around her. She had taught Thorne and his men that true mastery isn't about chasing records or seeking glory. It's about falling in love with the process, respecting your tools, and finding your strength in the silent, disciplined pursuit of perfection. This story, while a fictionalized account, touches on a universal truth that applies far beyond the battlefield. The lesson of Eva Rostova is a powerful one for all of us. In our own lives, in our careers, our hobbies, and our personal growth, true mastery is never born from a single, grand achievement. It is forged in the quiet, consistent, and often unseen hours of practice and preparation. It's the daily discipline of showing up, honing your craft, and focusing on the process, not just the outcome. We all have a rifle, we are trying to master it. Might be a musical instrument, a business skill, a new language, or the art of being a better parent. Whatever it is, the path to true excellence is the same. It's about the quiet mastery born from relentless dedication. So, I ask you, what is the craft you are dedicated to mastering in your own life? And how can you apply that same quiet, consistent discipline that Eva Rostova demonstrated to your own goals and aspirations? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I wish you all good health and the strength to pursue your own path of mastery. If you found value in this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content that explores the depths of human potential. Your support means the world.